Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to Vasant Cloud Talk YouTube channel. So I welcome you all, uh, and this is day one of YAML. So today I'm going to start with YAML, and that's a very important skill for anyone who is working in cloud, or if you're into DevOps or even into automation. So why I'm talking to you about YAML is, or why do we need YAML is YAML helps us describe the system in a very clean and a simple way. That's what we are going to see in our future sessions. So it is used in many real world tools. So learning it very early. So if you're someone who is into the early steps of cloud or DevOps or into automation, so you must definitely learn this. It'll help you to work much easier later. And in fact, the most of the questions that we are going to see here will be coming in your interview questions as a coding kind of coding related questions and answers. So this will also help you in two ways. One is in your early days. I mean, it help you to understand what YAML is, and also it help you to crack your interviews. So before we move on to the next topic, what is YAML? So YAML stands for YAML are not markup language. YAML aren't markup language. That's what you see here. Again, that's a format which is used to store and describe data in a way that is easy for people to read. So just think of it as a simple way to write down information that the machines can also understand, not just human beings, even the machines can also understand. So it's a two-win, it's a win-win situation. And it is also used often for configuration files, which are files that tell tools how to behave. So when we say YAML is human readable, I also mean that it looks very clear and natural. Right? So when we read something like this, so it should be very clean and natural only. Then I personally feel that it's very clear and also it is very natural. So you do not need to read through a lot of symbols to understand the meaning, and that is one reason why it is so popular in modern engineering. Now the next thing is why a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer must know YAML. It's a very important question, right? Why should I know it? Why should I need to really learn? Why should I need to spend time on this? So if you work in cloud or in DevOps, you will see YAML almost everywhere. Yes, I really mean that. You will almost see that everywhere because it is used for deployment files. You can see that in the pipeline definitions, the service settings, in automation tasks. In very simple words, let me tell you, YAML helps to describe, right? Not to not to demonstrate or something, but just to describe how a system should be built and run, right? So you literally are telling the system, right, how you should be built and how you should run. So as a cloud engineer, I use YAML to define the infrastructure or the deployment settings. And if you're someone who's a DevOps engineer, you may use it for the CI/CD pipelines, the container setups, or for environment configuration. So the more comfortable you become with YAML, it's quite difficult, let me tell you. I know personally, but the more comfortable you become, the easier it becomes for you to read and work with these systems. Okay, and again, the third section, the basic YAML structure that you see here. So I'm going to walk you through the basic shape of a YAML file. In the very simplest form, YAML uses the key value pairs. So now, yeah, coming back to the basic YAML structure. So I'm going to walk you through the basic shape of a YAML file. And again, in its very simplest form, YAML uses key value pairs. So again, people, you might even get this question in your interview. They might ask you what a key value pair is. So key is the name of something, right? And the value is the information attached to it. So it's a name of something. So key is the name of something, and value is the information attached to it. So this makes YAML feel very straightforward. For example, if I write a name, a version, and an environment. So here you can see I've written a name. That's a key, right? That's a name of something. And I've got a version and I've got a environment. So I'm showing simple values, or the YAML shows the simple values in a very clean format. And this kind of structure is easy to understand and it is easy to maintain, right? For example, the name. So the name of this YAML file or the name of this application or a system is my app. That's a key, and here is the value. So I've got a version, and the version is 1. The environment is dev, just that it's completed, right? So then some of the key YAML concepts I would like to explain. So talking about the key concepts, let's talk about the main building blocks of YAML, right? The first one is the key value pairs, which we have seen just now. And this is where one name is linked to one value. For example, right? For example, we have got an app name, and then we have got a port number, and that can be written clearly in a small block. So that's a very key thing, and that's a very important thing to start with. And the second concept is the list. So lists are useful when you want to group several items together. So here, this is where one name is linked. This is for example, you might list multiple servers or multiple services. So like you see here, I've got web 01, web 02, and web 03. So I'm listing multiple servers here. So each item in this list is written in its own line. It's not followed by comma or something like a delimiter followed by that. Servers followed by the web servers, like basically the lists. And that makes the structure easy to follow. The third one is the nested objects. So this means one section can contain another section inside it, right? And that is useful when you want to describe a service with its own details, like example, a name and a replica count, right? And nesting helps to keep the related information together, and that's what we call it as nested objects. And one or few important rules, let me tell you. YAML may look so simple, but there are few rules that really matters. The first rule is the indentation. Just imagine I have literally spent days in fixing an issue, and finally I found it was an indentation issue. Yes, that's true. And again, the next thing is spaces are important in YAML. Yes, you need to have spaces, not tabs. And the way you indent your content will change the meaning. So keep your spacing neat and consistent. The second rule is to use spaces, not tabs. Right? So tabs can cause problems in many YAML files. The third rule is to stay consistent with your indentation depth. So if one section is indented more than another, then it may read as something different. So there are no braces, the curly braces thing here. So we have to be very careful about the indentation. So indentation acts as both the braces, like the start and end of a set of objects, a set of pairs, and a set of concept or a system. The fourth rule, the most important one, that the strings usually do not need quotes. So please don't add any quotes, but they can be used when and where needed, because these small habits make your YAML easier to read and less likely to break. And also you will have enough time to learn it as well. Fine. Moving on to the example part. Right. So now let us look at slightly a larger example. So this is a small, simple deployment configuration. As I told you, we can use YAML for deployment, and the majority of thing, it will help you in the deployment part. And this is the kind of YAML that you might see when working with Kubernetes. So it starts with a very basic field, such as the API version on the top. So the key is API version, and the value is apps v1. So I'm building a deployment, and the API version of it is not just apps, it's apps/v1. And then it moves to the metadata. So I have got a key value pair, API version is apps v1, and then I've got a kind, which is deployment, and then the metadata, which gives the object of a name, right? So I'm giving a name to this object, and that's what is sample app. So I'm building an app, I'm building a deployment. So I need to give a name for my deployment, right? So I'm giving the name as sample app. So after that, the specific section, the specs basically, so what we are giving us here, which describes what the deployment should do. And this could include how many replicas to run. Here it is 1. And which container image to use. So here I'm using Nginx latest, and here you can even see I've got even nested part, right? There's a spec, and inside that there's another spec. So even though this looks longer, it is still just a structured way of describing a system. See, I've got an API version, a kind, metadata, a name for that metadata, the spec, and how many replicas do I need, what selector, what match labels do I need for that, and the app. So here the same name for the metadata and the match label. So anything that comes with a sample app should be the same name. So again, this is not a Kubernetes session, this is a YAML session. And then I've got a template where I'm having a container, I'm bringing a container image inside it. So the next thing is, so I've given a simple deployment config here. So the next thing is some of the common beginner mistakes. So when you start to learn YAML, a few mistakes will happen very often. And one common mistake is mixing the tabs and spaces. And so instead of you giving spaces, we give tabs. And another is using the wrong indentation, a very, very common mistake. And the third mistake is forgetting the dash when writing a list item. So when you're writing a list item, so here if you see, I've got a containers. So this is a list. So I can have multiple containers, right, in my pod. I'm adding my first container, sample app with Nginx. So if I want to add another container, I have to add another minus or dash. So that's the difference, and that's a common mistake that you must avoid. And some beginners also confuse arrays and objects because both can look similar at first glance. But again, on top of all this, a good news is that these mistakes are easy to fix once you understand the pattern, right? And with the help of AI as well. But it's better you start fixing on your own rather than using AI, because the more you learn, the more benefit for you. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes to spot them. Some of the practice exercises, so now it's time to practice. So what we can do is we can try creating a small YAML file that describes an application, and we can include that application, the name, the environment, and the list of services and a nested configuration block. So this will help us to connect the ideas that we just covered to something real. So overall, a quick summary. Uh, let's do it before we summarize the things. So a very simple example, as I told you, I'm going to create a very small YAML file where I'm going to describe an application. I'm going to include the name, the environment, a list of services, and also nested configuration block, as I told you. So starting with the very first thing, so it's going to be an application followed by, so the tabs, right? The name, I'm going to give the name as, and before that, let me even start this with a YAML. Okay, fine. So application is going to be name, and the name, for example, in this case, I'm going to give it as web API, followed by environment. So I'm going to give the environment. So after the colon, I'm going to give a small space. That's going to be development. Yep, I'm really bad at the development spelling. And now the services. So the services part, and here I'm going. So these are the multiple services I'm going to add. So something like a list of services. I'm going to give tab minus a dash space auth services followed by API services followed by worker services, right? So these are the services which I'm going to have in my application. And then I'm going to come back to my original services part, because this does not go under my services. I'm going to give the config section. So config followed by the replicas. So I'm going to have two replications in my system. So replicas is going to be 2, and the port number is going to be 8080. I'm going to follow this port number, and the logging part. So the login will come with level. The level of logging is going to be information, just that. So this, as I told you, it has got an application name, and the name of the application is web API, followed by the environment. So I'm going to use dev or development or stage or production. And the list of services is auth API worker. And finally, a nested configuration block, which contains this. So basically, when I'm telling configuration block, so configuration block with the nested items with the replicas 2, port number 8080, and the logging level info. So why I'm telling you this before I wrap up is you might get this question in your interview. So please be careful about that. Please be ready for that. So all we did so far is we just created an YAML file with the application, just that. Okay. So before I wrap up, again, let me reiterate every single time. So this is a core skill for cloud engineers and DevOps professionals. It is simple, it's readable, and also it is used in many modern tools. And that's for sure, because Kubernetes, you can't skip that, right? For any chance, you can't skip GitHub or GitLab or any other tools when you're writing YAML. So if you understand its structure early, you will be able to read deployment files, you'll be able to read the automation files and the pipeline files with much more confidence. Also, you'll be able to handle, face your interviews very confidently. So today I have covered the basics. So what we looked at is what YAML is, why it matters, and how its simple structure works. And that is a strong starting point, and it will help you a lot as we move forward. In the next section, we are going to see about the syntax and various other concepts of syntax and data types. So until I see you all in our next video, it's bye bye from Vasant Shanmugam and your favorite Vasant Cloud Talk YouTube channel. Take care and bye bye.